I give thanks to all these senators who have spent hours and timeless debates and energy to come up with this report, which I have the pleasure of presenting before this House on behalf of the committee. Madam Speaker, we are requesting the House and the membership of the House to pass this motion. And I will try to explain it in a very brief way so that the members seated can understand what we are talking about. The motion is very legalistic, but it's very simple. Madam Speaker, the Attorney General on 21st November 2022 wrote to the Senate clerk and asked the delegated legislation committee to propose that we give extension to 1,764 pieces of rules and regulations which were derived from 400 acts of parliament that were due for automatic lapse or revocation on the 23rd of January 2023. The Attorney General in that letter, he attached a copy of all those regulations and asked us to help him give extension so that those regulations can still be effective despite the fact that the automatic revocation that was supposed to take effect in January should now be extended further by another year. Honorable colleagues, we looked at the request by the Attorney General. The Attorney General was asking us to do like an omnibus approval of saying these 1764 regulations should be all extended, coming from 400 acts of parliament. A very big request, Madam Speaker, a very serious request. Some of the regulations, if they lapse, if we revoke them, it would mean some parastatals which are actually existing or were created by force of those regulations, those parastatals will cease to exist. Madam Speaker, it would mean out of the 400 acts of parliament that are in force, those regulations which are making those acts to be implementable would cease to function. A very serious request. And so, on behalf of this Senate, we expected the Attorney General to come himself to explain to us the reason why all these laws were not extended, all these regulations were not extended on time. Madam Speaker, the committee records its great disappointment that the Attorney General did not take this matter as seriously as we thought he should. Instead, he sent one of the legal counsel to represent him. And Madam Speaker, one Samson Davis Maundu, Principal Legal Counsel, came from the Attorney General's office to the committee meeting. Madam Speaker, we tried to interrogate Mr. Maundu on various issues. And he kept on asking for time to consult with his principals in the office, who could not attend the meeting for reasons that we were not convinced were good enough. At the end of it, Madam Speaker, the committee then said, because of the heaviness of this matter and the way Senate is taking it, we would request to re-invite the Attorney General to come to the committee so that him, being the principal legal advisor, would come and explain some of the questions that we had as a committee, which we were not getting answers from Mr. Maundu. And Mr. Speaker, we did request for that meeting, but that meeting never took place, Madam Speaker. It never took place, and we are convinced, Madam Speaker, that the Attorney General's office did not give this matter the serious attention that it required. Especially, the committee observed that under the Statutory Instruments Act 2013, in particular Section 21, subsection 2, the person who is supposed to actually seek for an extension of a regulation is the minister responsible. And the minister responsible, the cabinet secretary responsible, is supposed to seek the extension in consultation with the committee. Madam Speaker, unfortunately, there was no cabinet secretary who came. So the committee of the Senate observed that it was unprocedural for the Attorney General to purport to act on behalf of all the cabinet secretaries who were seeking extension of the application of those rules and regulations from the 400 acts, yet they never came before the committee. They never consulted with the committee. Madam Speaker, here is the problem. The problem is we were asking questions, and these questions even the Attorney General could not answer, even if he came. If, for example, you are dealing with the coffee rules, the coffee regulations, if you are seeking to extend, the question the committee was asking is, why did you have to wait until the last minute? Where were the officers within your ministry? What were they doing? And we needed justification for us to accept those extensions. And Madam Speaker, this particular section of the Statutory Instruments Act made it mandatory that the Cabinet Secretary should come and make consultations with us before seeking the extension. And it was not done. In fact, the Attorney General did not come. So even the argument of him being the legal officer for the government did not arise because he did not come to explain himself. So, Madam Speaker, the Attorney General, after failing to honor the committee's invitation on the 8th of December 2022, we decided and resolved and made recommendations, 2 recommendations as I finished. That number 1, pursuant to Section 15(1) of the Statutory Instruments Act and Standing Order 195, subsection 4B of the Senate Standing Orders, the Select Committee on Delegated Legislation recommends that the Senate resolves that the statutory instruments exemption from expiry regulations, legal notice number 217 of 2022, be annulled. And the second one, that the respective cabinet secretaries urgently republish and submit to the Senate for scrutiny the respective statutory instruments pursuant to Section 11 of the Statutory Instruments Act 2013. So, Madam Speaker, it is my duty, therefore, to move this motion, which speaks to what we found out on behalf of the Senate. And this is an indictment on the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, that your ministers are not following what is required of them under the law. Your ministers are not doing what is supposed to be done under the Statutory Instruments Act. We, as a select committee, are not happy that your ministers are not cooperating with the Senate Delegated Legislation Committee. And we are saying we are annulling these rules, and we are inviting now that they republish those rules. And because the Prime Cabinet Secretary is in charge of coordination between the Senate, the National Assembly, and the Cabinet, if they could speak to this issue, because there are serious legal consequences that can follow because of this issue. And we feel very sad that we could also call the Attorney General to a committee meeting. He sends someone who has no answers. We give him an opportunity. We agree on a date. He does not turn up. And he's the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya. The reason he exists is because he needs to do the correct thing within the law. Madam Speaker, we are not happy as a delegated committee, and many of the members, Madam Speaker, expressed a lot of dissatisfaction in the manner in which 1,764 regulations, which are supposed to operate 400 acts of parliament, were not being handled with the seriousness of purpose that the Office of the Attorney General and the ministers concerned ought to. So, Madam Speaker, our prayer is that we approve this report in its entirety as we annul all those 1764 regulations from the 400 acts of parliament. Madam Speaker, I therefore move, and I ask the Honorable Chair Gay to second this motion. I thank you.
Honorable Chaladige.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and thank you for the Vice Chair of the committee, Senator Danson Mungatana, the one and only Mlamwamba, or Mlamamba, something like that, Mr. Speaker, as is famously known outside in Tana River and in the Republic of Kenya. Madam Speaker, this is a very straightforward matter. I think this is not the first time that the Senate and the Parliament have annulled rules or rules and regulations in its recommendation in the report. So, Speaker, is a sad state of affair because over 1,000 plus rules and regulations, Madam Speaker, are stand. Madam Speaker, as you are aware, there are organizations and agencies within government are as illegal as at now. Because of this illegal extension, the legal notice issued by Attorney General, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the current Attorney General and my good friend, former Speaker of the National Assembly, Speaker Justin Buni Muturi, or JP Muturi as is known, is a former member of Parliament by the fact that he is also a Speaker of the House. He knows the critical, the pivotal role that Parliament plays. So, Madam Speaker, when we get a former colleague snapping a committee of the House, some of us find it sad and unfortunate. Because we expect a lot from our colleagues who sat with us in this parliament, Madam Speaker, and appreciate the unique role that the parliament plays. What do you show, Madam Speaker, to the others who have never served in parliament? Madam Speaker, this legal notice number 2017 that was issued purportedly by the Attorney General is illegal ab initio. The law is very clear in Statutory Act that an extension is sought by the specific cabinet secretary. If it is a rules and regulation that concerns hospital, the CS in charge of health, Madam Nakumicha, should be the one. Madam Speaker, if it is about the National Assembly over 400 acts of parliament, Madam Speaker, and the rules and regulations like pest control, it is the CS of Agriculture, Senator Mithika Linturi, who should be in a position to request extension. The practicability, Madam Speaker, we appreciate that the delegated committee of both houses, National Assembly and the Senate, cannot sit and be able to pass 1,761 rules and regulations in a go. That's why the law has provided for an extension. But it is done by the specific minister, Madam Speaker. And therefore, this was illegal from the word go. And therefore, I agree with the committee that the specific cabinet secretary not only is lost to gazette and request for extension of such regulations, Madam Speaker. Speaker, I don't know why the committee did not use powers. There is what we call Powers and Privileges Act. And there is powers that have been given, I think, Article 125 of the Constitution to summon any witness. An exception is not the AG. Therefore, we cannot, Madam Speaker, the work of Parliament is not a wedding. It's not a baby shower. It's not a party day party where we say, please, can you come? Can you appear? Madam Speaker, the Powers and Privileges Act and even the Constitution has given us powers, the quasi-judicial powers of the High Court, to even summon when the invitees have declined our invitation. And even the law has given us powers that the Inspector General of Police should produce that witness to its failure. And even those powers have been given that we can surcharge those state officers by making them pay even above 500,000 Kenyan shillings, way and above, as part of failing to appear before the committee. Madam Speaker, I want to challenge the Committee of Delegated Legislation through my brother, the Vice Chairperson, that they have powers to summon the Attorney General if he fails to come, Madam Speaker. This business, this is not courtesy. It is the law requires that if the Attorney General, or even as Madam Speaker, where I serve as public accounts as a Vice Chair and the member, we have on several occasions summoned governors and ensure that they are frog marched. The famous case called Mwangi Wairia of Muranga, Madam Speaker, because I sat in the previous. We even directed then that it will be produced by Inspector General of Police, and the IG appeared before us and explained why he could not frog march Mwangi Wairia. So when I see former Governor of Muranga, Mwangi Wairia, lecturing us about integrity, about going to Mandamano, I always cry for this country. Because the same person who is saying follow the rule of law declined when he was the governor to appear before public accounts, which is given power by a constitution. Madam Speaker, these people are just the hypocrites of the law. We went even ahead and fined the former governor of Kitui, Madam Charity Kaluki Ngilu. So it is the instruments that we envisage that we can summon and charge them, Madam Speaker. And if they fail, Madam Speaker, and I want to challenge from this floor of the House, the President has been very magnanimous with Parliament. That is why we amended the standing orders, Madam Speaker, so that cabinet secretaries can appear before the floor of the House and answer questions. The President of the Republic of Kenya, Dr. William Samoei Arap Ruto, has instructively all government officers must appear and answer questions before Parliament. Madam Speaker, the goodwill of the President should be respected by the people, including the Attorney General, and we cannot take it lightly, Madam Speaker. We shall employ the president both in private and in official capacity, Madam Speaker. That some of these individuals, whether cabinet secretaries or the attorney generals, who feel or they are sickly to appear before parliament, they must do so, because the president, as even us as Kenya Kwanza in parliamentary group meetings, he has insisted that government officers must appear before parliament. So there is no two way about it. Madam Speaker, if somebody does not want to appear before parliament, they get paid by taxpayers. They serve Kenyans unless they serve anybody else. Because anybody, including us here, the senators who are seated here, we serve Kenyans. We serve our independent. Madam Speaker, you serve Kenyans at your capacity. Who else is our boss? It is the Kenyans. And therefore, when these organizations remain illegal, as they are today because of rules and regulations, somebody must be held for commission or omission. And therefore, I want to urge the committee that they should stop writing love letters to the person concerned. This is a serious matter, Madam Speaker. Let us be serious. And Madam Speaker, we should avoid casually, just casually when you are invited before the... And Madam Speaker, in future, and that is my thinking, if any cabinet secretary, because the Attorney General enjoys the status of a CS, if any cabinet secretary, Madam Speaker, through your office, declines to appear before a committee, they should not appear before the Senate. You cannot refuse to appear before a committee of the Senate, then you want to appear before the Senate to answer questions. Madam Speaker, you should give a direction and a ruling that such individuals who don't want to appear before committees, they should not appear before the Senate during question time on Wednesdays. Madam Speaker, the third point, finally, because this is a straightforward matter, operation, and therefore this is to challenge the cabinet secretaries that they need to be the ones that issue the extension of these rules and regulations. Madam Speaker, the rules and regulations are many. I wouldn't want to tire my colleagues. I know the report has been prepared by the committee. These are 1,761 rules and regulations. Madam Speaker, some of them are critical, including many, Madam Speaker, both cutting from aviation, agriculture, and many others, Madam Speaker, that will facilitate. And therefore, legal notice number 217, the Statutory Instrument Act number 23 of 2013, and extension on rules that were sought, Madam Speaker, they should be or should not suffice legally, because it does not hold water, Madam Speaker. And the recommendations of the committee, of course, be annulled, and therefore I would request colleagues that, Madam Speaker, you cannot cherry pick. I know some government officers, when they appear before National Assembly, they imagine they should not appear before the Senate. We had that problem in the last parliament. We cannot allow that to happen. Therefore, even if they had appeared before the National Assembly, Madam Speaker, they should not be in a fallacy that they can appear. Because, Madam Speaker, Article 93 of the Constitution, 2010, it says Parliament is the Senate and the National Assembly. I think I'm the least person to advise the Attorney General, because he's more learned. Not he's more learned, he's more senior than some of us. Article 93 is very clear. And having served as a Speaker and Member of Parliament, you should be aware, Madam Speaker. The finally is we need to republish, because there are many organizations, Madam Speaker, that are as illegal as at now, as I had indicated, because of number of rules and regulations that are there. So, colleagues, I want to urge that let us move ahead and ensure we follow the rule of law. We are exercising all this on behalf of the people. The powers that we have been given, Madam Speaker, is the law-making powers. There is no anywhere other in this country that they have as privileges that we have as parliamentarians. We can make the law, we can amend, we can annul, we can nullify. Those are powers that we have been given, Madam Speaker, that we enjoy. And therefore, when rules and regulations comes, Madam Speaker, our Committee of Delegated Legislation have an obligation. And therefore, I want to congratulate and thank the committee for the job well done. Madam Speaker, we want our committees of the Senate to always do their job as per the law, in good faith, to table their reports, Madam Speaker. And I beg for the respect of this House, and Senator Kavindu, we served with her in the last session. For the respect of this House, we must annul these rules and regulations. For the respect, Madam Speaker. I was here when we did a march of justice from the Senate launch. That was not Maandamano, let me call a Senate of Justice. We went through Parliament Road, GPO, Valley Road, up to Milimani before Justice Weldon Korir, where we were challenging more than 24 legislations that been assented by former President Uhuru Kenyatta without the concurrence of the Senate. This House has come from far. We drafted those pleadings, courtesy and support of your Secretariat, Madam Speaker, from your office then. And I can see most of the people on table office led by Senator, Clerk, maybe in future, Clerk Zakayo Mogere, although the word Zakayo has another meaning on the streets, and my sister Zia, they were there, and we worked before the High Court in Milimani, Madam Speaker. From 2013, by the way, Senate has been fighting to survive. And I ask you, my colleagues, the fight is still on. A luta continua. For the Senate to have a position in this parliament and to be respected, we have had to fight many hurdles. We have had to overcome many challenges, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, being an immediate former Secretary General of the ruling party, you know, and by the way, thank God, the President of the Republic of Kenya, all Senate at the highest esteem. And that is why Senate needs to thrive during this session, because we have the blessings of the highest office in the land to do our job, Madam Speaker. We are not saying the support of the President in any way means that the Senate should not do its job. We are doing it, but we are doing it in complementarily, in what we call symbiotic relationship. I don't know, in biology form 2, for some of us who's people, there was what we call symbiosis, where you study and there is that symbiotic relationship between the executive, the parliament, and the judiciary, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, the survival and the fight of the Senate is still on. Even on division of revenue, since 2013, we have been seeking Supreme Court. In fact, Article 118, Madam Speaker, there was a time that they would say Senate should not be involved in budget-making process. We went to Supreme Court, they say budget involvement of the Senate must be there, Madam Speaker. Even on the issue of money bill, I know of colleagues who have generated bills, but when it reaches to the National Assembly, they say this is money bill, Senate should not be involved. Madam Speaker, when you talk about security, it's a national government function, but it affects counties. When you talk about immigration, there are many counties like Kilifi, like Busia, like Bungoma, who border other countries. Should counties and Senate should not be involved because it's an immigration issue. Madam Speaker, the soul and the heart of this House is on the line. And such decisions we make before this floor of the House will make this House to be respected and to be allowed to do its job, Madam Speaker. Therefore, I challenge my colleagues, let us agree with the report of the delegated legislation led by our Vice Chair, Senator Danson Munkatana, who is also representing us in IPU. I can see, I'm surprised, Madam Speaker, I didn't know Senator Eddie Okech is in the House. I saw him in Wayaki Way, Wapi, and all over, Madam Speaker. I saw him hanging around the tarmac on the road. But I'm happy he has realized that the people of Migori did not send him to be on the streets, but be on the floor of the House. And I hope, Senator Danson, you are guiding him. You know you are a senior properly. But as Speaker, with those very, very remarks, and with utmost respect, I beg to second and urge my colleagues to adopt, as is the report of the committee. I second, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Chiragide. Honorable Senators, I propose the question that the Senate adopts the report of the Select Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the statutory instruments exemption from expiry regulations 2022, laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 28 March 2023, and that pursuant to Section 18 of the Statutory Instruments Act, resolves to annul in its entirety the statutory instruments exemption from expiry regulations legal notice number 217 of 222. Honorable Senators, this matter is now open for debate and contribution from the members. I call upon Senator Roba Ali Ibrahim to contribute.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this motion by the Committee of Delegated Legislation, which is, exhaustively done and presented by Senator Mungatana. And I rise to first thank them for a job well done in really safeguarding the interest of the nation first, the interest of entities that are affected, because sometimes requests will be presented to various committees, and if you don't keenly look at those requests, you're going to really cause a lot of inconvenience and disadvantages to many. The legislations that are proposed to be extended affect many different groups. However, it is important to hold people to account for failures to implement regulations as they are presented. And when you talk about regulations that affect over 400 acts that are published, and what is being discussed as 1,764 regulations that affect over 400 acts is a very serious issue. Our committee, our ABLE committee, has done a wonderful job in making sure they have dissected, looked through it, and they have also given, the right opportunity for the persons who have sponsored, the extension of these expiries to appear before the committee with respect, so that they're able to defend why and what has led to these regulations not to have been given effect in the due course by the persons who are responsible. The committee has reported here, Madam Speaker, that neither the respective CSS nor the Attorney General have responded to the invitation that was given by the committee in order to make sure that they seek further information, further clarification, so that they're able to make informed decision. In the absence of that, the committee has recommended for us to annul that request, and I rise to support this annulment request and support the motion as presented, and also adaptation of the report as presented by the Select Committee on Delegated Legislation, in order to make sure that the right thing is done. There is no lesser house in the actual sense. The people of this house are people elected from the entire county, and then if maybe persons responsible, accountable officers, do appear before the National Assembly and fail to appear before the Senate, this is going to create a precedence that will render this Senate irrelevant, and which we cannot allow. As such, I support the motion to annul and the motion for adaptation of the report. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Esther Okenyuri Anyen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise to support this motion and agree with the recommendations of members of that committee that has just been laid by the good Senator of Tana River, Mlamamba. Madam Speaker, in supporting some of the recommendations that they actually made, maybe if I share my experience from the Health Committee, Madam Speaker, in the Health Committee, this is for the third time now, We are requesting the CS for Health to appear in our committee, and she has failed to appear in that committee, not even for the induction meetings that give members basic knowledge on what the ministry is doing or how we should closely work with the ministries to help them achieve their mandate in serving the several millions of low-class citizens, middle-aged and well-doing Kenyans. So, Madam Speaker, I think it's a time as the Senate, we stand with whatever we agree. Then other houses are going to take us seriously on this issue. When you write to even a CS, the responses are so basic that any other school-going child can actually read and don't show up. Why should you respond very basic issues if the committee had alternative ways of actually looking for information? Then they should not have even written to you. There's a reason as to why senators even seek for statements, not to just get written answers. When they actually write for you to appear physically, there's information that you can actually get from a one-on-one engagement than sending officers who are on acting capacity, whom you can actually not take to account on anything you agree at committee level. So I actually support this proposal in as much as it's actually radical. It's actually going to give the Senate a new lease of life, that we do not actually complain of being ignored, but show how tough we can bite and how we can stick to whatever we agree. And Senator Cherargei said it here very well. There's no way you want to not to appear at the committee, but you want to appear at the Senate, where you are only responding to a question and you'll go out. There's no chance for members to even interact further. It's limited. So, Madam Speaker, I support this motion and urge other members of similar opinion to support it in its entirety. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Joyce Corinne Chepkoech.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this chance to also echo my sentiments pertaining these rules and regulations from the various departments. Honorable Speaker, I also want to thank the Committee on Delegated Legislation, led by our EPO Vice Chair. Being a member of the same committee, Madam Chair, I want to say that we deliberated on these issues. We checked, looked on a number of issues, on a number of issues that are supposed to be followed, because this is just the reason why it's being annulled is because of the procedures that was not duly followed, Madam Speaker. And I want to say this, Madam Speaker, that the reason why it was not followed is because I believe there was a notion that the committee might not take it serious. That is why they allowed over 1,000 rules and regulations to be announced today, Madam Speaker. I want to say this, Madam Speaker, that it is not a good practice for this country, especially when we are fighting to improve the economy of this country. It is not a good practice. We are not setting a good precedent in terms of how we are doing, or the way the cabinet ministers are setting their rules and regulations for them to be able to operate, Madam Speaker. So I want to say that the committee went ahead, having invited them to come and deliberate these issues together with the committee, and look at the issues that the committee wanted to be addressed. And having failed, Madam Speaker, it is the committee that have decided that this should be annulled. And that is why, Madam Speaker, I want to thank the number of members who have spoken to this report, that they are in agreement that it has to be annulled, because we are not here, Madam Speaker, Honorable Cherargei has said that we wrote some letters love letters. It was not love letters. It was just a respect that we gave them. So they should not take our respect for granted, Madam Speaker. And that is why we have shown them through the annulment. So I don't want to say much, but I just say that I am in support of the committee to annul this report. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Joyce. There are no other requests for contribution to this debate, so I now want to call upon the mover of the motion to reply. Senator Mungatana.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak, to reply. And I beg to reply, Madam Speaker, as follows: that I appreciate, Madam Speaker, all the speakers who have spoken to this motion. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Honorable Gerard Gay for seconding this motion. I want to thank the Honorable Esther Ekenyuri, the Honorable Joyce Korir, the Honorable Ali Roba, and Madam Speaker, I'm grateful that they had confidence in what we have done as a committee. Madam Speaker, we are sending a message to the executive that they must take their work seriously for the benefit of this country. So, Madam Speaker, I beg to reply, and I wish to request that you defer the putting of the question to a later date pursuant to Standing Order number 66, sub rule 3. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Mungatana. I will defer the putting of the question to tomorrow at 2:30, and I would also wish to rearrange the order paper, the business of the day. So I want us to go to order number 21, so you can call it out, Clerk.
Order number 21, motion, compensation of the Kenyan victims of the 1998 bombing of the United States Embassy in Nairobi.
Senator Agnes Kavindu, you had 13 minutes remaining on this motion.
Thank you, Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to complete my motion for compensation on the Kenyan victims of 1998 bombing in the United States Embassy in Nairobi. Madam Speaker, I had already read all what I had written on the motion, and I want to continue and say that I don't see why the American government should not compensate Kenyans who died in these bomb blasts, and those whom some of the parts of their bodies were cut off by the effect of the bomb, and some of them are seriously hurt, they were seriously injured, they are still undergoing treatment, and some of them are really, really suffering because of lack of funds. There are children who never finished their schools because their parents were the sole winners, and they are the ones who are educating them. And so because most of the parents died and most of them lost their jobs, they could not continue with their studies. And so the fund, the US victim of the state-sponsored terrorist fund, which is there, should then compensate the Kenyans, and I don't see why they should not be compensated, given that even the American government people, officials, dignitaries have been visiting, who have been visiting the Nairobi Memorial Park for 1998 bomb blasts. Just namely, a few of them who have visited, one of them being Prudence Bushnell, the US ambassador. He visited the scene in 2001, and Michael Ranneberg visited the scene. The US ambassador also visited the scene again in 2008. Hillary Clinton, the US Secretary of State visited the scene in 2009. Ron Kang, a U.S. ambassador in Kenya, visited the scene in 2009 also. Joe Biden, the U.S. Vice President then, in 2010 visited the scene. Barack Obama, the U.S. President, visited the scene in 2015. John Kerry, U.S. Secretary of State, visited the scene in 2015 also. And Robert Godek, U.S. Ambassador, and Lori Munkerson visited the scene in 2018. Rex Tillerson, the U.S. Secretary of State, visited 2018. David Hale, the U.S. Secretary for Political Affairs, visited the scene in 2019. Eric Nicola, the U.S. Charge d'Affaires, visited in 2018, and Margaret Whitman, the U.S. ambassador, visited in 2022. And just most recently, Jill Biden, the U.S. First Lady, visited the scene this year actually, 2023. And so all these dignitaries, being aware of what happened in Kenya and what took place, and our people died. Our people are still suffering. I don't see why our people should not be included in this fund, and that is why I'm requesting the Foreign Affairs Ministry, the minister, the CS, and our embassy in America. They speak to the government of the U.S. and speak to them so that they can include Kenyans in this fund so that they can be compensated. And I had agreed with Cherankai that he will second me, but let Senator here second me. Senator, you are going to second me because Cherankai is not here, so you're going to second this motion, please. Senator Hedy, you're going to second this motion and then to be open. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kavindu, have you moved the motion?
Mr. Speaker, I move the motion and I ask Senator Hedy to second.
Senator Hedy, it's your time.
Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity to second this wonderful motion by the good senator of Machakos County, Senator Kavindu Mudhama, on the compensation of victims of what I will term as international terrorism that occurred in our borders in 1998. Madam Speaker, international terrorism is something that countries have continued to struggle with. And even before we talk about the victims of such kind of heinous crimes, we have seen concerted effort by different countries who have got good cooperation among themselves. We have seen constant cooperation in terms of dealing with the terrorism, even between Kenya and the United States, to the extent that that collaboration that we have always seen before terror attacks happen in the country or otherwise should be the spirit with which we approach this issue of compensation. And Madam Speaker, I say this because when I hear that there are families that lost lives in 1998, in fact, history tells us that in this particular incident, 213 Kenyans lost their lives in that attack. There is no any life that is important than the other, but comparatively, 12 Americans lost their lives in that attack. And then we are told by history as well that 5,000 people from both countries experienced other kind of damages, be it to property or to their own physical and psychological torture due to this terror attack. Now, Madam Speaker, when we look at the people who died in this problem, Madam Speaker, some of them were actually working for the US Embassy. And this is the kind of goodwill that I'm talking about, that when we talk about terror attacks and the problem that comes with terrorism in our borders, I think it is something that should not be confrontational. I think it's something that should not even be able to bring conflict. It should be in good spirit for the United States to actually consider helping those who suffered from these terror attacks. Madam Speaker, there are families that their children who were left without parents because of this particular attack, to the extent that, Madam Speaker, these kids that were left without a parent, or even in some cases 2 parents gone, Madam Speaker, they will experience a lifetime of poverty. They are most likely to die without ever getting education. They are most likely to die without ever getting employed. They are most likely to die without ever having the capabilities of owning property. In some cases where people were maimed in these terror attacks, it is so inhuman, Madam Speaker, to see that they have lived with this curse for so long. We are talking about 1998, Madam Speaker, when I know personally as Eddie Okech that when I lost my own mother, not in related matters, I lost my own mother in 2003, Madam Speaker. And when I lost my mother, I know the trauma that comes with losing a mother, to the extent that when I was still in primary school, I was forced to drop out of school to try my own life, in which, struggling in the back streets of Migori town, I ended up finding myself in Nairobi, and I ended up being supported by other families that gave me a chance. In total, I was adopted by 7 families so that I could be able to get education. That is why today I bear a name of the 2 most confronting and 2 most rival tribes. I bear a name Okech and I bear a name Gisheru, because a Gisheru did not see any tribe in me but a talent in me and supported me to go to school. I can imagine that somebody like me, who did not come, who was not a victim of war, a victim of conflict, had to struggle to find a basis, to find even a compass direction in life. What about those that lost their parents in the dust of this terror attack? Up and above economic emptiness that they have experienced, up and above medical problems that they have experienced, the trauma, Madam Speaker, is unbearable. Sometimes it is not clean and clear in the minds of people who are sitting way overseas. But, Madam Speaker, this is an issue of humanity. This is an issue of human dignity. This is an issue of morality. This is when the United States, a country that prides itself as the land of the free and the land of the brave, should actually self-examine and be able to think about these families, not as Kenyans, not as Africans, but these families as one human family, one race of humanity, and be able to work with the government of Kenya, Madam Speaker, to ensure that these families are not only compensated, but are supported to find a bearing in their lives, are supported to be able to dream, are supported to be able to build families that have got meaning. In any case, Madam Speaker, as I finish, we do know that under the Justice Department in the United States, the funds that are always collected to be able to support efforts to assist people who have been affected by this kind of terror attacks are usually fines and money that are raised in the general population in the United States. And these funds, Madam Speaker, are proceeds of sometimes violations of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act in the United States. That means that it is the people of the United States that are putting together these funds to be able to respond to those who have been unfortunate to experience deaths and even loss of property and health, which they did not plan. So, Madam Speaker, I want to urge the government of the United States, and I want to also urge the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Diaspora Affairs in our country, that this is not a matter that we should be able to confront each other with. This is a matter that the United States should look at it as an issue of human dignity, as an issue that no family ever signed to work in the United States borders or within the embassy and planned to be found in these attacks. And in any case, people who were going about their business innocently were actually working in a pseudo land in the United States, because an embassy is actually a territory of the United States in pseudo terms. So I want to urge the United States government, and particularly the Justice Department of the United States, to make this a serious consideration. And it's a consideration that I think that will go far in terms of even cementing the relationship between the United States and Kenya. Because if you stand with Kenya at times when we are struggling with dealing with people who innocently, some of them gave their lives without knowing, by working for the institution, the US Embassy at that time, then we see a friend. Then we see a country that we can work with. Then we see a country that we can trade with. Then we see a country that we can be able to build a strong relationship with. This is one of the best motions that I've seen in my time in Senate, and I believe that this motion is going to test the bilateral relationship that is between Kenya and the United States. And as I second, Madam Speaker, I want to urge us, even as senators, that we support this motion, and we also put some pressure in the executive to take a different approach that can be able to build this relationship, and these people get compensated and they get better life. With that, Madam Speaker, I second. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Honorable Senators, I propose the question that, aware that disaster is defined as an overwhelming event and circumstance that tests the adaptation of responses of a community or individuals beyond their capability and leads momentarily to massive disruption or function for a community or individual that often exceeds their capacity to cope using existing resources. Further aware that such was the case with the 1998 U.S. Embassy bomb disaster in Nairobi, in which many of the Kenyan casualties resulted from the collapse of adjacent buildings located within a 2 to 3 block radius, and with the reverberation being felt in most parts of Nairobi, that resulted in 213 Kenyans and 12 Americans killed and over 5,000 citizens of both countries being seriously injured. Noting that U.S. allies, including Kenya, have endured the great burden of death and long-term, and in many instances, permanent physical and psychological injury. Further noting that the United States government has since compensated some of the victims and families of U.S. citizens, leaving the families of Kenyan citizens and certain other victims uncompensated. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, 1, advances friendship and cooperation between the United States and Kenya by supporting the eligibility of Kenyans and American victims and their personal representatives, surviving spouse, and next of kin in the Victim Compensation Fund pursuant to the Justice for United States Victim of State-Sponsored Terrorism Act, and 2, partners with the Ministry of Health to explore subsidized medical treatment for the surviving victims of the bomb blast. Senators, we now are free to make contributions to this motion. I will call up Senator Siengo Beth Kalunda to contribute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand to support this motion by Senator for Machakos County on compensation of Kenyan victims from the bombing of the U.S. Embassy in 1998. Disaster strikes when least expected, as it happened in 1998 when Kenyans awakened to international terrorism. Madam Speaker, it is saddening to know that since it happened several years ago, 25 years ago, American government has compensated some of the American individuals and families, and Kenyans are still languishing and suffering. For me, I will read discrimination. Discrimination in the sense that the Kenyans who lost their lives, some got maimed, some are disabled, others blind, they are suffering. They may not take, even those who survived, may not take their children to school, may not contribute even to nation building as expected of them. Madam Speaker, the Kenyans who were working at the American Embassy and others who were in the adjacent buildings suffered. Some lost their lives and others, as we have stated. Madam Speaker, U.S. prides herself in democracy. It would be prudent for U.S. to compensate Kenyan victims who suffered from this international terrorism. Madam Speaker, looking at what has been happening, there are so much other disasters and international terrorist attacks that have happened, and action has been taken. Why leave out these Kenyans? So, Madam Speaker, I would request the Kenyan government, I know under the leadership of His Excellency William Samoei Ruto, who says that they are following bottom-up model, minding about the hustlers, those who are suffering. These are some of hustlers. Those Kenyan victims are hustlers. So the government should take priority in pushing for compensation of the Kenyan victims. Madam Speaker, I stand to support the motion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Beth. Senator Joyce Corinne.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Allow me to congratulate one and only Iron Lady from the land of Machakos, the Kamba Nation. I'm seeing his brother is looking at me furiously. I want to say this, that this is a very emotive issue that has taken ages before it is concluded. The details are within the government and even the United States, that is the Washington, D.C. I've been trying to do some research, and I've seen that they are also willing to pay, but I believe there are some misunderstandings between the United States and Kenyan in terms of amendment of some laws to allow them to pay the victims. As it has been stated, Madam Chair, I want to say that it will be prudent if we can take this seriously, not just to debate in this House, but to take it seriously to an extent that the relevant committee, together with the motion mover, could have a meeting with the relevant ministry so that we can have, I can talk of an ad hoc committee between I can talk of an ad hoc committee to be formed, Madam Speaker, that will address the issues ranging from the Kenyan Embassy to the Washington, D.C., and to this Parliament, so that we can have a conclusive report that will pave way on how best we can handle this. So, Madam Speaker, this is something that we cannot just debate, we cannot just talk, but we need to get facts on how far has it gone in Washington, D.C., how far has it gone with the embassy, how far has it gone with the ministry, so that the issues that have been raised by Honorable Mrs. Mudhama can be addressed adequately, Madam Speaker. So I don't want to say much, but I want to say these are victims who have really suffered. Some of them can even, are no longer working. Some of them died. Their families are frustrated. Some of their kids might not even be going to school. There are a lot of unanswered questions, Madam Speaker, which is seen because I've also tried to have a look at some, do some research, and I've seen a number of comments being done by the former Prime Minister, and I've even seen comments being made by the current President, whom I know is so much concerned about this compensation to these victims, Madam Speaker. So I want to say, let's handle this with a lot of concerns. I will request through your chair, Madam Speaker, that before we conclude on this motion, you may make a better ruling that will enable, will enable this House, because now it's a document of this House, will enable this House to really fast track and know the exact position of this matter. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Senator Manzo Daniel Kitunga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this important motion. Madam Speaker, I support it. Madam Speaker, when this happened, I was a fourth-year law student at the University of Nairobi, and I remember as I was leaving Parkland's campus, there was this loud bang which shook Nairobi all the way even to Parklands. And when I came to town, I realized the town was chaotic. I had actually had personal friends who had been injured in that place. Some were working for Cooperative Bank, and even a gentleman who was walking at the roundabout near that area where the U.S. Embassy was based, got, from the force which had come from the bomb, got his clothes torn off and found himself naked, and later on in the hospital. I was in Nairobi and I followed the events. There was a Minister Kamoba who was actually having a meeting with Prudence Bushnell in the building nearby. And, you know, there was a very big effort to save Kenyans. And it was really bad. But at the same time, Madam Speaker, there was, at the same time when this happened, there was another bomb in Tanzania and there was another bomb in the Sudan. So it was international attack. It was not really negligence of the country, our country, or even the Americans. It was just an act against the Americans, actually, and against the American government. It was an act of war. And subsequently, because we were very good friends with the Americans, it hit us here. Madam Speaker, I have a very, very personal interest with the American Embassy in Kenya, because my wife worked there for 19 years and then resigned to complete her PhD. So there are people I know very well. Some of our workmates even were in that bomb situation. But I also want to say quite a number of Kenyans I know got injured there. Now that there are some proceedings going on and there has been an effort to do something, and quite a number of American leaders have visited the memorial park, and it is something known very well, even by the President of America, and quite a number of senators and congressmen and women who are our friends, and are very close to the Congress and to Senate in the U.S. I know quite a number of people. And in fact, when Senator Chris Coons was here, after meeting quite a number of Kenyans, I'm the last person who had a cup of tea with him before he flew back to the U.S. And they actually represented senators because we were on recess. And they checked whoever senator was around, and I went to represent all of you. We had, at Kempinski, I had about an hour or so with him. He's a very resourceful senator. So I believe out of the good friendship we have with the U.S. government and the U.S. Senate and the U.S. Congress, and even some very influential people I know who are doing quite a number of activities in Washington, like my first employer, Feroz Noroji, who is an advocate, and who is busy now doing writing books, and is now currently at Washington, and he's a very well-known lawyer and understands this. We can have a way of getting even representation or getting a team, as it has been proposed, to be able to address this matter once and for all. Remember, recently, the Honorable Paul Muit, as an advocate, addressed the matter of Mau Mau after it took so many years. So this matter can be addressed. Some of the victims are still alive. Others have passed on. Their relatives are here. They are suffering. I remember there's a lady who was known to PLO Lumumba, I think the sister of PLO Lumumba, advocate, who I used to go and see in the university, I mean at the embassy as a student, and she was helping me with some works I was doing on my dissertation. They were that resourceful. The mistake we did as Kenyans was to put the embassy in the middle of town, or to allow, but it is not really our mistake. Terrorism can attack anybody anywhere, and the outcome of terrorism in one way has to be addressed. And that's why they have come up with the victim of state-sponsored terrorism fund. And that fund being existent, it means then it is just that matter of legislation, probably because this is a different state, so that these people can be compensated. But it shows that there is a goodwill for the people to be compensated. It's only that a little bit of action. And I believe this action can originate from this Senate. And probably it may mean an amendment of this motion so that we can capture a committee be set up. I really want to urge the mover to think of that. A committee from this Senate be set up to approach the Senate in the US and probably the congressmen. And they're very good people. In February, I attended their national prayer breakfast. And they were very, very organized, and we were hosted by about 30 congressmen in the evening before. And when we went for the next day for the national prayer breakfast, it was something else. So they are very familiar. We visited them in their offices. So we can also get one or two congressmen moving the other side. But when it is house to house, Madam Speaker, is much better. House to house, it moves faster. And therefore, I believe we can be able to move this very fast. All the victims are identifiable. That's why there's a memorial park. Their names are there. Those who are blind are still around. I know one or two friends of the Honorable Kavindu Muthama, who even met a week ago when we were preparing for something concerning her. So they are friends. She has friends with those people and people she had known even before they were injured. You can imagine somebody who suffers blindness in mature age, how they find it so difficult to navigate. And they have children who are going to school. And I can assure you these families really, really suffered. And not only these particular victims, there was a cooperative, Ufundi, whose building was completely brought down, Ufundi Cooperative Society. That cooperative, and there were savings of members, they have never recovered. So although they tried later on, they need some compensation of some sort. The cooperative bank building was affected. They actually repaired it themselves. I'm sure they suffered some loss, a big loss actually, which almost saw the bank in a financial crisis. So because the building was damaged and the employees and things like that. And you know, that's the headquarter of that bank. So we need to look at the whole thing so that as you compensate the victims, then you also compensate any other damages which were done to the country you know what exactly happened. And in the future, really, we must really think of fighting terrorism as a country. We must stop these local wars and think very carefully, because recently we were hit in Westlands. These terrorists are still around. The other day I approached Minister Kidiki together with a team from Makueni County on the safety of the highway, the towns, the railway gauge. A lot of times, you know, there are supposed to be people who are patrolling there. But a lot of times the vehicle is broken down. And you know, we are all using this railway gauge. Our children are using it once in a while, everybody. But a lot of it in Makueni, which goes for about 200 kilometers, is unsecured. You saw recently what is happening in churches. The churches need to be secured every Sunday, or for the Seventh-day Adventists on Saturdays. You saw what happened in our neighboring country, Congo, where a church was attacked and 58 worshippers died. And this terrorist actually had come from Kenya. He's a Kenyan who had been indoctrinated. He's now been arrested. He's there, you know, in the Congo. So if we have this, and we have even a lot of Kenyans, young Kenyans who had gone for training and are around. In fact, one fellow was coming to commit an act like that in a public gathering, like the one we had yesterday. And then he saw his mother singing there. And the mother had not seen him for years. So he decided not to go on with, he frustrated the attack. And you can see at times these people even sneak past our security. So we even need special training on this so that we can really secure the country and avoid this sort of disaster in the future. Because when it happens into other places, there may be no fund like this. And even as Kenyans, we should begin thinking of a similar fund in case things happen here. And even the other terrorist activities which has happened in Kenya and has injured people, like the one in the Westlands. Some people's cars were destroyed. I know one or two people who lost their relatives there. They have not been compensated. So, Madam Speaker, I think it's really something we need to think very carefully about, want to support it, and want to agree with our great commissioner that something more than what we have presented here needs to be done, so that, Madam Speaker, we can be able to help Kenyans in this regard. I support it.
Thank you, Senator. Senator John Methu. We have 3 more interested in this debate. We hope you'll be considerate on time.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I would want to also allow my other colleagues to comment on this motion. I rise to support this motion. I am of the opinion, Madam Speaker, that this is a very, very timely motion. I don't know why the Senator for Makueni set a precedence of really people mentioning where they were when this attack happened, because I was barely a class 1 pupil. I was a nursery school kid, and that makes it even sad that I have grown all the way to become a senator, and no compensation has been made to the victims of this particular terrorism attack. Madam Speaker, from my records, I am seeing the definition of a victim as an individual who suffers direct or threatened physical, financial, or emotional harm as a result of commission of crime, and in this case, it will be terrorism. So, Madam Speaker, the 5,000 that were injured in this very, very unfortunate terrorism act, and the 213 Kenyans who died, and the 12 Americans who died, Madam Speaker, duly qualifies to be deemed as victims of this crime. Madam Speaker, in fighting and combating terrorism, terrorists must never feel like they have won. Terrorists must never feel like they had it. And one of the major wins for terrorists, Madam Speaker, is when they imagine that they have inflicted too much pain on a country and a people that are not able to recover. To ease the burden and prove to them that they never succeeded, Madam Speaker, is why I'm very, very convinced that this is a very, very timely motion that we must consider. And reading into the prayers of the motion, Madam Speaker, that our own government, our own Ministry of Foreign Affairs advances friendship and cooperation between our country and the United States to support the eligibility of Kenyans and their American counterparts. Those who survived the victims and those who were injured in the whole attack, Madam Speaker, that they qualified to get a share of the victim compensation fund, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is my very, very considered opinion that we must then first build the nexus between the Kenyans who are in the embassy and the American government. Madam Speaker, the reason why it was just that embassy that was bombed, just as my colleague has elaborated, it did not just happen in Kenya. It happened in Kenya, it happened in Tanzania, it happened in Sudan. The target, Madam Speaker, was the American people and the American government. So, Madam Speaker, it is not the laxity of the government of Kenya. Neither is it the laxity of the government of Sudan or the government of Tanzania. This was an attack, just like any other terrorist attack, Madam Speaker. So in this case, the nexus between the victims and the government is in the sporadic attacks that happened in the three countries. So, Madam Speaker, then, as a country and as a people, we must cooperate with the government of the United States so that, one, we try, and I am persuaded by the sentiments of our colleague Senator Manzo, that we could even upscale it to the level of even this House. We have had a very cordial working relationship with the Senate of the United States. We could approach this matter in a more bipartisan manner, Madam Speaker, that we stand in the gap of those ones who perished in that very, very heinous act, Madam Speaker, that we take that burden. It is not fair, Madam Speaker, that year in, year out, we shall speak about these victims. Some of these who were injured, Madam Speaker, have died. Poor people who had, had good working, they had good jobs. They have not been able to take care of their families. They have died, poor people. Madam Speaker, if we do not take the bull by its horn now, I don't know then when shall we take this matter. I would never want, Madam Speaker, that we get to the situation that every morning and every evening we speak about Mau Mau and their descendants, and we have not been able to do anything since 1952 when they were in the forest, Madam Speaker. Shall we, Madam Speaker, 60 years down the line, still speak about this 1998 attack, Madam Speaker? Something has to be done. Who is to do that thing, Madam Speaker? It is ourselves. The burden is on us, Madam Speaker, and we just have to do it, Madam Speaker. The second prayer, Madam Speaker, is that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs should partner with the Ministry of Health to explore subsidized medical treatment for the surviving victims of the bomb blast. Madam Speaker, this surely is not a big player to ask, Madam Speaker. It is not really too much to ask, Madam Speaker. These people suffered in the line of duty, Madam Speaker. These people are victims of a terrorist attack, Madam Speaker. If then the government cannot give them even subsidized medical care and support, what then can we show as care for the people who have had this kind of suffering, Madam Speaker? We have, Madam Speaker, and this one should not be a matter of, it's not a matter that we can discuss, adjudicate, argue about. This should be a matter that can and should be addressed almost immediately. We do not require the government of the United States to come in handy to help in giving our survivors of the 1998 bomb blast medical support. Just like we have been asking that if they are surviving Mau Mau heroes, let them be given medical support. It is the least that we can show as respect. It is the respect that we can show as an appreciation of the kind of work that I have done for this country. Madam Speaker, it is not, and I am very, very convinced that it is not any wish of anybody to find themselves trapped in a terrorist attack. A terrorist attack can happen anywhere. if we do not take care, if we do not love, if we do not give back to victims, then it is a win for those who are, for the terrorists who are attacking us, Madam Speaker. We should prioritize taking care of the victims to prove to the terrorists that we as a people, we have stood, we as a people, we have won, we as a people are showing you that we have overcame the kind of attack that you have done to our country. Madam Speaker, it is not the only attack that has happened, but in the magnitude of this particular attack, and it is not really fair that year in, year out, people come to visit the 1998 bomb blast memorial or whatever. Every time we get a leader from the United States, every time we get a leader from another place, every time we get a leader from another. So then, when shall we speak about the victims? When shall we speak about the survivors? When shall we speak about those who died? We cannot just keep lamenting every day. We cannot just keep saying that a bomb blast happened. Yes, it happened. Out of the bomb blast, 12 Americans died. Out of the bomb blast, 213 Kenyans died. Out of the bomb blast, 5,000 people died. If, Madam Speaker, we cannot speak about them, then there is no point of doing the memorials every year. The memorials then will just be painful for the victims. Imagine, Madam Speaker, a person who lost their sight, a person who lost their limbs, a person who cannot walk, and they are switching on their TV, and the government has never done anything about them. Nobody has ever spoken anything about them, and you are switching on your TV and you are seeing that an American senator, an American envoy, an American deputy president, an American person is visiting the memorial of the 1998, and you are just at home. How does it make you feel, Madam Speaker? The time to speak about those victims is not next year, it's not next election, it's not the next Senate, it's not the next government. It can only be us, and it can only be now, Madam Speaker. So I would want to support this motion with everything that I own, everything that I have, everything that would add weight on this particular matter. Finally, Madam Speaker, and I want to stress this point. I would want to belabor this point, Madam Speaker. If we want to prove to those ones who have attacked our country year in, year out, we must take care of our victims. My final comment, Madam Speaker. Today, Madam Speaker, in my very, very considered opinion, becomes a very big day for the women of this country. In my life, my short life in politics, I have not seen women rise as high as I've seen today, Madam Speaker. That a woman from your county, the Honorable Sabina Chege, is now a party leader, Madam Speaker, is something that we cannot just, we cannot just keep quiet about, Madam Speaker. That's a very major win for the women of this country. And I would want to congratulate the Jubilee Party, Madam Speaker, that out of the many parties that we have, the Jubilee Party has found it that they can have a woman at the highest decision-making position, at the highest position of the party, Madam Speaker. And that is such a good swap, Madam Speaker, that we are coming from a retired president, and we are now putting in new blood. We are now injecting the spirit of women. Women have been told to multitask on many things. I'm sure the kind of struggle that was there in Jubilee when they had the former party leader, they will come to an end naturally because a woman is now on top, Madam Speaker. So I congratulate the Honorable Sabina Wanjiru Chege, the new party leader of the Jubilee Party, and I feel that as the women of this country, they must celebrate. Thank you very much.
Senator Medho, we take note of the new developments that are happening within the political landscape, though it was not connected to the debate, the current debate. Now it's time for Senator Mofayagata.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for I need your protection, Honorable Speaker, from Senator Manzo, who is trying to disrupt my presentation. Honorable Speaker, I stand here today a very sad person because we are debating over an issue that took place close to over 20 years, 25 years when Madhu was in nursery school. There is now when Madhu was in his nappies. Honorable Speaker, we have had a lot of debates about compensation across the board, both in the National Assembly and the Senate. If you check, we check our archive, quite a number of honorable members have brought motions on compensations. We had a motion that was supposed to compensate the former county council councillors. That motion was brought, I think, in the National Assembly close to 15 years down the line. There is a motion also as well, which was supposed to compensate Mau Mau, people who lost their land, they lost their property, they lost their lives. There was a motion also, Honorable Speaker, which was supposed to compensate teachers. So I don't know, Honorable Speaker, the seriousness that we are displaying, because we may end up talking a lot of English here, a lot of very beautiful presentations, but some of these things will not end up anywhere. And I want to congratulate my sister, our mom, Senator Kavindu, for coming up with a brilliant idea. But the most critical part of this idea is to make sure that we do the necessary follow-up. Because I think this motion, Honorable Speaker, will require a lot of involvement. We need to bring a lot of stakeholders on board. Because if you remember, Honorable Speaker, the target about the bombing was not even about Kenyans. The target was about the Americans who were living in Kenya. And I've heard quite a number of other members say that we had other attacks in Tanzania and so many other places at the same time. So it is the responsibility of the American government, Honorable Speaker, to make sure that the Kenyans who lost their lives, who were crippled, who were maimed, get their dues. And I'm sorry, Honorable Speaker, and I will just repeat it again, that we are discussing these things 25 years down the line. And I hope, Honorable Kavindu, because this motion is quite viable, that we bring on board quite a number of stakeholders, even if it means going all the way to the America, to the government, to make sure that we pursue this matter conclusively. Because we have had a lot of talk, able to talk on these conventions. Today, somebody brings a motion to compensation. We have lost a motion on the compensation of Mau Mau fighters. We have lost a motion on the councillors. We have lost a motion on teachers. So let's not create a house of rhetoric where we just come and argue, make some very beautiful presentations, and then that thing just goes and dies just like that. So this is a serious matter where we are talking about lives, and not even this motion alone. Honorable Speaker, we have lost very many people through dubious circumstances in this country. And it's very important, Honorable Speaker, that this time around, we must get to identify that the stakeholders, the necessary stakeholders who are supposed to make sure that we get these people compensated. Though some of them died, we have relatives and next of kin who maybe have lost livelihood because the people who used to earn on the half died. So I think, Honorable Speaker, I want to congratulate my sister, my mom, Honorable Kavindu, for bringing up this motion. And I'm happy because I think this will involve quite a number of other committees. Honorable Speaker, through your guidance, maybe you will do an under committee which is supposed to bring on board quite all those stakeholders so that we can pursue this matter conclusively and get to have these people paid as it is required. I strongly support.
Thank you, Senator Kataya. Now I'll invite Senator Chirali K. Samson to.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order, under Standing Order 110, looking at the gravity of this motion, Madam Speaker, I request that we give latitude and more time and engagement to improve on this motion, Madam Speaker. I request that the debate be now adjourned until a later date, Madam Speaker, to allow amendments to the motion to ensure that we involve most of the Senate and Madam Speaker bring about changes that we can speak at the Senate, including even engaging the Senate of the Republic of the United States of America, so that our brothers and sisters and victims, Madam Speaker, can have opportunity. Madam Speaker, as I move this adjournment of debate, Madam Speaker, is that I know there are colleagues who wanted to contribute, but we wanted to go and refine it and make it better so that we can contribute. I wanted to contribute, another colleagues here, Madam Speaker. Therefore, I just request that we move and allow the amendment to this motion, and probably, Madam Speaker, and as Madam Speaker probably is, I request, Madam Speaker, as per the standing orders, that the senator who has not spoken to this matter request that this since a motion, Madam Speaker, I request Senator Danson Mungatana to second. Senator Eddy, you had spoken to it.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second the idea and the brilliant motion that has been brought by my colleague, whom I respect very much. Madam Speaker, I really have to agree with that amendment, the adjournment that is seeking to amend this motion. Madam Speaker, I received a telephone call about a month ago in my office from a gentleman who comes from Tana River County, in fact, within Garsen constituency, one of the constituencies in the county. And he called me to inform me that the victims of the bomb blast have been asked to get in touch with their senators so that the senators can create a list of people in a sense to make a follow-up for them to be compensated because they had not received anything. And then I looked at the order paper and I saw the Honorable Agnes Kavindu's motion, which had not been debated. It has been there for a long time, and I connected the two. So I purposed that when this motion comes before the House, I would support it. Because this motion, Madam Speaker, and the victims are not just people from Nairobi, people from Machakos. The people who are affected, Madam Speaker, include people from Tana River County, people who are looking for jobs here in Nairobi, people who are working in offices, people who are walking along the streets for leisure purposes, people who are affected from various counties, Madam Speaker. And this motion affects all of us, Madam Speaker. And so it is a good move today to second this idea that has come. Because, Madam Speaker, 7th August 1998 will remain a very big memory in the minds of many Kenyans who saw what happened that day, who watched on television, who heard the cries, who felt the pains of those who lost their loved ones, Madam Speaker. The American government, Madam Speaker, deployed 900 FBI agents. It was the biggest deployment of FBI outside America since the world wars, Madam Speaker. And they came here and combed every piece of evidence. And these bombs, they erupted simultaneously, the one in Dar es Salaam and the one in Nairobi. They named them the Ken bomb and the Tan bomb. And Madam Speaker, they collected a lot of evidence, a lot of information. And these people, Madam Speaker, they are thorough in their jobs. They have the records. And I wanted to agree with those speakers who spoke before me that in fact there is a sense of discrimination, in the sense that they have the information, really. They have the knowledge of who was involved, who was affected, who died, who got hurt. Records are showing that 4,500 people were injured, amongst from those who were dead from that bomb blast. So, Madam Speaker, the spirit of this motion is to seek compensation. The spirit of this motion is not confrontational. Mheshimiwa Kavindu did not want us to file a suit. She did not want us to confront the American government. The spirit of this motion is that, can we do something for those people who did not get anything? And suggestions have come here, Madam Speaker, that maybe we need to have some sort of a Senate committee. And this I support, so that we can speak to our colleagues who are either congressmen on the other side or senators even, Madam Speaker, on the other side. So the spirit of this motion, Madam Speaker, needs to capture actually what we are talking about. And it is good, and I hope Honorable Agnes does not feel maybe bad about this, but it is good for us to adjourn it so that she can get the feeling of the Senate, amend it, get all this information, and see how you can accommodate all of us. And those ideas of us cooperating with American government, those ideas of us forming a team that will probably engage directly with our colleagues, those ideas of Honorable Manzo of house-to-house engagements, Madam Speaker, they are very, very useful ideas. Therefore, I wholly second this motion and urge our colleagues to accept it so that we can make real movement. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
The matter being debated today is a matter of great national importance, which has necessitated a motion to be moved by Senator Chiradige seeking to adjourn the debate so that the motion may be amended. Now, having considered Standing Order 110 and having considered the motion that has been moved by Senator Chiradige and seconded by Senator Mungatana, I do hereby direct that the debate be now adjourned to a later date and the relevant amendments be filed before the debate resumes next. I now put the question that the debate be now adjourned. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Next order. We have reorganized the order paper once again, so we'll have order number 20.
Order number 20, motion, the doping menace threatening Kenya's impeccable global reputation in athletics.
Senator Chiradige, you had 11 minutes to complete moving the motion, the debate on moving the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to continue. Madam Speaker, you gave me an opportunity to thank our brothers and sisters who performed very well in London Marathon and Boston Marathon a few weeks ago. The biggest challenge, Madam Speaker, is on the aspect and the issue of doping that is affecting athletics. It's not only athletics, it is football. It's not only football, it is any guy in rugby. And I know Senator Eddy, if I'm not wrong, he plays rugby, Madam Speaker. Football is in the team, the Senate Bunge FC. I know a number of them are playing football FC. I don't know what Senator Karungo can play, but from the look of things, some of the people might be good at night running. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, this threat is real. the issue of doping, and it is denting our image. You remember Russia was banned, Madam Speaker, because of doping menace, Madam Speaker. I want to urge at least let us run clean sports. If you are a footballer, you don't need to reach the level of Dennis Oliech or anybody else who plays in the league, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we need to have athletes who are clean. And I want to say anti-doping agency has failed this country, Madam Speaker, the other. You know, there is a famous, Madam Speaker, famous footballer called Maguire. Now, Adak is behaving like Maguire, Madam Speaker. It's called Maguire, or I don't know, he's the player of Manchester United. Whenever he's on the defense of Manchester United, he normally aids the Manchester to be his own team to lose to get football, Madam Speaker. I respect the fans of Manchester United, but when you have somebody like Maguire, he's a liability in the team, because the moment Maguire comes, Madam Speaker, you are sure that your team will be scored on goal. So that is what is happening with anti-doping agents for us who are football lovers, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are many athletes, a number of them, Madam Speaker, that have been blacklisted, Madam Speaker. But because of corruption in ADAC, Madam Speaker, anti-doping agency has not done one sensitization. Number two, has not tell us which substances are banned. Why are they banning athletes only? They need to ban laboratories that they are doing that. They need to ban the pharmacists, Madam Speaker. They need to recall license of doctors who aid some of these athletes and sportsmen and women to use doping substances, Madam Speaker. But what ADAC does, they only ban the athletes. They don't even allow DCI, Madam Speaker, to investigate people who are giving substance of doping to our men, young men and women, Madam Speaker. And we are being told the effect to biological of a person is very dangerous, Madam Speaker. Most of these athletes, after using these steroids and doping, Madam Speaker, their batteries are dead. They can't bear children, Madam Speaker. They shoot blanks, Madam Speaker. And therefore, this is a very serious public health issue, Madam Speaker, that as a nation we must sit. I fear for my younger generation, my age mates, Madam Speaker, because at least Senate, they used to refer Senate as Nyumba Wazee, but majority of the young people are here, Senator Eddie, myself. I don't see other senators, of course, who are young enough. Madam Speaker, this is a house where we have everybody on board. And we fear for our future generation, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the biggest challenge is the issue of compliance. Up to today, ADAC or DCI or EACC has never tabled a report. Madam Speaker, can you believe there are sports coaches, trainers, who come using tourism visa, but they are training our athletes in Kaptagat, or in Mount Kenya, or in Nairobi, using tourism visa. Madam Speaker, can you believe? You know, this country, just some things are shocking, Madam Speaker. Because how can a coach fly in all the way, using tourism visa, trains our athletes? Madam Speaker, which country are we living in? And you know, sports is our greatest resource as a nation. Kenya is known today, whenever you walk in the streets, in Europe, in America, and you tell somebody you come from Kenya, they tell you like this, where people like this, where people are doing like this, where people run, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we need to be serious as a country, Madam Speaker. We need to be serious. We can't allow our young men and women to be abused. Where is the immigration? Where is the Ministry of Interior? Where is the DCI? Where is the EACC? Where is the NIS? I know NIS was being blamed, Madam Speaker, the other day because of Shakahola. And Madam Speaker, I saw the party leader of Senator Eddie Kisheru saying that Shakahola annex is somewhere. Madam Speaker, as we blame the NSIs, what are they doing, the immigration officials? Until, Madam Speaker, until coaches who are not trained, we don't know what they do. They just walk in, wear sports shoes, wear tracksuit, and they say we want to train, Madam Speaker. In fact, if we are not careful, we can have even human trafficking, where we allow the Madam Speaker to
Senator Chiralike, you will have 5 minutes, a balance of 5 minutes when the House resumes tomorrow at 2:30. Honorable Senators, it's now 6:30 p.m., time to adjourn the House. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until tomorrow, Wednesday, 3rd May 2023 at 9:30 a.m.